time for another Walk On Red Shirts podcast. Appreciate everybody listening. If you're not doing so already, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on all social media. Today is Big Ten, except we're only doing one half because the Big Ten's got about 87 teams. We've got Big Bear Tyler from First and Goal. If you're not listening to them already, make sure and go and listen to them. They just dropped their first episode for the fall. Appreciate you joining us, Tyler.
Yeah, and they got a shout out on the new college football playoff, the college football 25 game. I saw that recently on your social media, Big Bear. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that we can just live rent free in everyone's heads. Every time you watch football and see First and Goal, you're just thinking of us. That's the only thing you can possibly have come to mind.
Hey, the problem with me is that my offensive line is absolutely terrible and my wide receivers can't catch. Now, Tommy Spinelli is leading for the Heisman with about 3 games left. We just beat Oregon. Senior year, he's been transferring around a little bit. Started at Kent State, played 2 years, went to Washington, had some disagreements with the coach before he decided to go back to Ohio and start for Ohio State. But it's a journey. He's using the portal to his advantage.
Probably had that Jimmy Lake type fight in Washington, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some disagreements with the coaching staff philosophy. They were running the ball way too much, and Tommy knew that his arm was the key to the NFL. He wasn't going to be just handing the ball off.
Yeah, touchdown, Tommy.
Yeah. So he spent some time in the Big Ten. He has an understanding. We could get Tommy on here eventually, when he's done with his playing career.
We should definitely get Tommy on here.
But Tyler, appreciate you joining us. Today we're going to focus on what I consider to be the new Big Ten West, which is Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota are going to be the teams we focus on today. Next week we'll focus on everybody else, mainly Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. I guess you could throw Maryland in there and maybe 1 or 2 other teams in there as well. But let's start with this because the main storyline here is the westward expansion. The Big Ten has always been in the Midwest. You think of Ohio State versus USC, you think of Oregon versus Michigan, you think that game is played in the Rose Bowl. Now that game is a conference game. Tyler, what is your take on all of this expansion? Originally, it was just going to be USC and UCLA, and then last second, Washington, Oregon jump in here. What do you make of this, and what excites you about the new conference?
Well, first of all, let's have a moment of silence for the fallen Pac-12 because
it's Pac-2. Pac-2.
Whatever's left of it, of course. Regardless, I think it's great for these 4 teams to be able to get into what is now considered the top 2 conferences in college football, at least in my opinion. I think it's great for the conference also just because, one, a money factor, you're getting into the markets of LA. You can kind of get into the Pacific Northwest. Washington just made the conference, won the conference title, then made it to the national championship, was the runner-up. Oregon, without sounding like a homer, they're known for just great marketing, and they've really been a flashy brand for the last decade, 2 decades, and so bringing them into the conference that has a lot of tradition and history, I think that it gives a different dynamic to it, but it's all in the same going to be great for all around just because we're going to see a lot new rivalries and a lot of premier matchups that you don't normally get in the regular season come up.
Hey, Tyler, some people are saying, not me, but some people are saying that what Oregon did to the river in Indianapolis during Big Ten Media Day was terrible, was pollution, and it is a threat to the entire city of Indianapolis. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's probably nothing more than domestic terrorism, honestly. I think the Duck really just took Indianapolis by stride.
Where do you even find a 250-foot inflatable duck to put in a river? I don't know if that's the actual size.
Jeff Bezos probably got it on Amazon. I'm sure Jeff Bezos got it on Amazon.
No,
I really hope so because I've been looking for it for about 2 years. Last year, I got the 40-foot stack of presents at Christmas. Now I need the 200-foot duck to be up there for football season. And my neighbors will love it.
Yeah.
So Oregon, obviously, they've been known for their flashy brand. They've made 2 national championship games, but they've had 5 different coaches between Chip Kelly.
Mark Helfrich.
Mark Helfrich. I was thinking Mark Herzlich, but he was the Boston College linebacker. Willie Taggart. And then Mario Cristobal. Now Dan Lanning. Usually with Oregon, when you go through that many coaches, you see a drop off. Eventually there's a miss. And Willie Taggart wasn't great, but he left on his own accord, was only there 2 years. Mario Cristobal, seemed like there was something going there, but then obviously leaves to go to Miami. And now Dan Lanning, honestly, out of those three, Dan Lanning's the best. And honestly, when you Mark Helfrich took him to a national championship game, but you saw how fast they fell after that. Dan Lanning seems like he brings different blood, a different excitement in the program. Now, granted, there's some rumors with some Nike money and Phil Knight trying to push it in there, so it definitely helps with the recruiting. But Oregon has been able to recruit well over the last, decade or so, bringing in guys well before there was NIL.
Yeah, I think back to Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich days. They were going for a lot of the 3 stars, kind of diamonds in the rough out of Texas. You had guys like LaMichael James, Kenyon Barner, D'Anthony Thomas that came out of the South, and we weren't really expecting those guys. Maybe DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, guys who had experience in the NFL after playing in college. And then I think where Mark Helfrich went wrong was he didn't really have a strong ability to recruit, wasn't a big fan of it, and therefore it really took a hit when you noticed they started to go to transfer quarterbacks. They had Vernon Adams, who was okay, but the infamous TCU bowl game, they blew a 31-0 lead in the second half. I remember that New Year's Eve. That was the worst New Year's Eve of my life. After that,
worst New Year's Eve of my life resulted in a missed field goal, so can't be that bad.
Then there's that. But a guy like Dakota Prukop comes the next year, and because of him being so bad,
who
exactly, he was so bad that we discovered Justin Herbert. So everything happens for a reason. It works out, and I think that the coaches that came afterwards have done nothing but kind of elevate the program more and more in terms of recruiting. So I can't say I hate the path of how we got here, but I'm sure as hell excited about where it's going.
Yeah, and Oregon obviously has been considered one of the favorites. They use the transfer portal to their advantage, and credit to them. We'll talk about some of the key players here, but Dylan Gabriel's obviously expected to be the starting quarterback, even though they did bring in Dante Moore, but Gabriel's got way more experience and just is way more polished than Dante Moore at this point. And the schedule for Oregon is interesting because they have a game against Boise State, who you can't take lightly. They've seen that before. The Civil War, I guess, or whatever it's called now with Oregon State, is being played earlier in the year. It's being played in September. They host Ohio State, travel to Michigan, end the season at Wisconsin. Well, not end the season, close to the end of the season at Wisconsin, and then with Washington. So there's definitely some games in here that they should win easily, but it wouldn't shock me if they ended up 11-1 for sure, especially when you look at that Ohio State. Even if they beat Ohio State, there's definitely some other games in here that can absolutely trip them up.
Oh, for sure. The thing that sticks out to me the most is the spots of their bye weeks. They have a bye week at week 4 after Oregon State. Then they don't have another one until the second to last week of the season. So there's going to be an 8-week stretch from the end of September through mid-November where they're just playing games. And that's where you're going to get Michigan State on a Friday, Ohio State the following Saturday. So a little bit of a buffer there. And then you have at Purdue the following Friday. So a 6-day window before your next game. And then followed up a couple weeks later at Michigan, a couple weeks later at Wisconsin. That's going to be pretty brutal. So I think that's a stretch of their schedule where the depth has to be there for them to win these games. But there's some slip-ups that could possibly happen.
Yeah, and Tyler, I think the thing that Oregon really got lucky with is the travel. So like what we have to think about now is all the big travel that a lot of these schools are going to have to do. The furthest you'll go is to Purdue. You go to Indiana, and I don't
Michigan. I guess you could say it's pretty close on that one.
Yeah. Between Michigan and Indiana, but those aren't like across the entire country. I mean, you're at least going to be. You're not getting to the coast. Well, I guess Michigan is pretty far over there, but I think they really dodged a bullet with that because most of the newcomers are having to come to Austin, which is good for y'all on multiple reasons, because now the other team has to travel, and Austin's a tough place to play. But you talk about their biggest rival, the monkey that they couldn't get off their back the last couple of years in Washington. They came too, and I'm not ready to write Washington off so quickly. I mean, they got Will Rogers out of Mississippi State, who's not a bad quarterback. I mean, he threw for a lot of yards in Mike Leach's offense, and I mean, Jedd Fisch comes over and takes over in Washington. Like, what is he able to do with a guy like Will Rogers? I mean, do you think that Washington is going to pose a threat that they have been the past couple of years against y'all?
Washington is really very much an unknown. The amount of pieces that they lost, especially on offense, after losing Kalen DeBoer. I don't think Will Rogers is going to be the main issue if that offense doesn't go. I think it's going to come more from the turnover aspect of things. We know Jedd Fisch can coach. He's had good stops. I believe it was at Fresno, then at Arizona. Discovers a guy like Noah Fafita and recruits Teteroa McMillan. Those were two of the better players in college football last year to come out of nowhere. And I think that he could do that same thing at Washington. It just depends on if the talent is there. And I think that's the part that people aren't really sure of. It's not a lot of names that you know.
Yeah, their wide receivers last year, when you had Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, and Roma Dunze, all three are gone. Michael Penix, another one, gone. That offense has a complete rebuild. And Jedd Fisch obviously helped rebuild that Arizona program. And, they were in the dumps. They had one win before he got there. And then they win 10 games last year. And that offense looked incredible. I don't know if year one Washington is going to be able to put that together. They do get a couple warm-up games. They go Weber State in Eastern Michigan. They play Washington State, but on a neutral site in Seattle. They play at the Seahawks Stadium. Northwestern at home, at Rutgers. Like, they could be 5-0, but it's going to feel like a fake 5-0 with who they're playing. Before then, they host Michigan, where the real challenge comes in. They go Michigan, at Iowa, off, at Indiana, USC, at Penn State, UCLA, bye week, and then at Oregon. Like, we're not going to see the same Washington team this year. Like, we're not going to see them go undefeated. We're not going to see them win 10 games. I think Washington is like an 8-win team, and I think I'm being generous because we don't know what this team is. I mean, I guess they could surprise me. Jedd Fisch maybe finds a way and puts it together, but last year it really felt like lightning in a bottle. Same thing with TCU the year prior. You get the right group of guys, you get the right group of seniors, and I think Washington takes a similar step back to TCU as they did last year.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Like you said, like TCU lost essentially their entire roster, their coaching staff besides the head coach. And yeah, they took a big lump from that. And I think Washington, I don't know, I don't think Washington's in as bad of a spot as
I would agree
TCU is. And especially because of the schedule. Like, I think Washington really, like you said, benefits from that first half of the season. And you can't overstate how important it is to get confident, especially, that confidence under you in a couple of wins, especially in a sport in which there's no preseason. The only preseason you have is against yourself, and it's in the spring. So, you start off with a fairly easy schedule. Now, granted, it's hard to win in college football. It's hard to win against anybody, but you get 5 people that you should beat in a row. You can't overestimate the confidence that they could come into playing Michigan with that. And what is Michigan going to be this year? I mean, we know the defense is going to be great. They got a lot of that defense back. But what is Michigan's offense going to be? And we can talk more about that next week. But, that's the toughest game. Then you have Penn State with Drew Aller. What is he? Is he going to take that next step? And then you get to the end and you have Oregon, which we know, there's very low chance that Oregon is going to be a bad football team. I think we know what Oregon is going to be, and I would assume that all three of us probably have Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, if not missing it very closely. So I wouldn't doubt. Yeah, I think 8 is pretty good, Jake. I think that's right around where they are. I mean, you got an Indiana team that's going to be tough. We don't know what in the world we're going to see out of USC, Iowa. Anyway,
Iowa is a tough. I don't care if Iowa can't play much offense. Their defense and playing at Iowa, that's not an easy game at all.
They got a new offense coordinator. They might start scoring points now.
They might score 20 points a game, up from their 15 or whatever they had last year.
Yeah,
don't watch out for them. Watch that out for them. So
Iowa's going to be like when your work does the Biggest Loser challenge, and the guy that was 400 pounds loses 100 pounds. Like, oh, yep, he made the biggest difference. Well, Of course they did. They had the most to gain. They had the most to lose. So that is going to be Iowa this year if they score 20 points a game. Everybody's like, wow, great job, Iowa.
Wow. You went from 98th to 75th in scoring offense. Like
what a jump.
You went up.
That's what she said.
There you are. Washington, I really am curious to see, because there's a lot of hype with Washington coming into the conference, but Washington has been so up and down over the past 2 decades that I don't know what we're going to get. Are we going to get a team that consistently makes a bowl game? Are we going to get one that sits right on that fringe line? Are we going to get one that's occasionally winning 4 games when they get a tough schedule in there?
Well,
I just don't know what we're going to see out of them.
And what is with Washington not being able to keep a coach? They've had really, really good coaches come through there that just don't last. And are they not able to retain them, or what? Because we had the one guy retire because he wanted to spend more time with his family, and his name is
Chris Peterson picking Jimmy Lake was a bad decision. Yeah. Jimmy Lake probably shouldn't have ever been head coach.
Jimmy Lake goes. Kalen DeBoer steps in. He goes. I feel like I'm missing one other coach that went there at some point in the past.
Sark was there for a minute, then went to He went to USC before he had his drinking problem.
Yeah, because Washington. Yeah, okay, then. So he left USC because of his drinking problem, correct?
Yes. But Sark only ever won like 7 or 8 games every year at Washington. He wasn't, 9, 10 wins. Right. He was just above bowl games. And I think Washington is just a very tough place to coach and recruit. Now, granted, you're in Seattle, so you have a little bit better, but the recruiting area of Washington is tough. You have talent up there, but you don't have, compared to some of the other parts of the country. Like, you're in the Southeast, you got everything.
You have talent, but you're competing against Utah, you're competing against Oregon, you're competing against USC. What does Washington bring to the table that Oregon doesn't?
That's a great question,
especially with nowadays. Like with, I mean, I'm gonna sound really old right here, but kids nowadays, Oregon's the flashy, shiny object. I mean, they have everything you could want in terms of facilities, NIL, brand, what they bring to the table. That's Washington's closest competitor in terms of talent pool, and Oregon's going to get all those guys. I mean, unless you grew up a Washington fan, or you don't want to wait behind the guy that's in front of you, you're going to go to Oregon. Would be my opinion. At least that's what I would have done as a kid. I don't know about y'all.
It seems like Jedd Fisch is trying to rally a lot of the donors into kind of building that NIL aspect. I saw a video out on social media in the last couple of weeks where he was really kind of trying to sell Washington to people, and I felt like that was kind of weird to me. I feel like a lot of the bigger universities, you don't really have to do that. It's just kind of the money is there in some regard. And so I think that's the struggle that Washington's been dealing with. The other thing is like the big recruits that you've had in Washington the last few years. You had Emeka Egbuka and JT Tuimoloau, and Ohio State came right in and took them.
Right.
And, Washington, Jedd Fisch should be a decent recruiter. I know Kalen DeBoer was an okay recruiter, but you can't let those kids walk. Those are kids that you need to stay home, and that's going to help change a program. And they just weren't able to do that.
If they want to build an NIL, they need to go knock on Mr. Starbucks' door. That's where it started. I would say Boeing, but you don't want to go knock on Boeing's door right now. You might not.
Boeing might not have a door.
Yeah, you might. Yeah, you might not. But it might. Well, it might have one, but it might be put together by duct tape.
Yeah, I don't think it might.
Or it might be laying on the ground while the plane's in the sky.
There you go. Alaska Airlines not much better either.
So USC is one of the other teams in there, and I have a hot take that Lincoln Riley's seat is getting very warm, and because of the amount of money they paid him. And last year, Caleb Williams, they had the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, and they just were not very good. He retained Alex Grinch for way too long. I kept a running spreadsheet to prove how bad Alex Grinch was. Would put it out every week to show everybody that Alex Grinch still sucks. He finally makes the decision. He's still in the Big Ten, New West, by the way. He's at Wisconsin.
That's true.
But he goes and makes a change, brings in a new defensive coordinator from UCLA. What is Lincoln Riley like this year? What is the expectation, do you think, for USC? Like, what do they need to get to restore confidence in Lincoln Riley?
I think a actual logical expectation is 8 wins. I think the market and the new fan that, because now everybody has access to USC, everybody has access to all this stuff. USC is no longer in the Pac-12. They're not playing at midnight anymore. People are going to have their eyes on them more so than ever. You're on more people on the East Coast watching them now. If they don't win more than 8 games, people are going to want them fired, because it's similar to Jimbo. So Jimbo comes into Texas A&M with all this pedigree. He wins a national championship with Florida State. He was on a national, he's recruiting at a national scale. He had them in the top 15 every single year. So let's throw money at him. Texas A&M wasn't a terrible program. They just were underachieving. And that's exactly what Lincoln Riley's doing right now at USC. He's not a terrible. Now, I could argue he's a terrible decision maker by, like you said, keeping Alex Grinch around, but he's doing a really good job of developing quarterbacks. What is Miller Moss going to be? I have no idea. But you have guys like Deuce Robinson, who got recruited as a tight end, I thought, but they have him listed as the wide receiver now. And then Zechariah Branch, who quite frankly has the opportunity to be a Blitnikoff winner with the amount of talent he has. Everything, I think, comes back to that defense, because you're going to score points. Miller Moss, I don't have a doubt that they're going to score points. They're going to be good on offense. They're going to be fine. What does that defense do? And USC's Achilles heel has always been the physical teams they've played. They could never get over the hump against Utah. They play against Tulane, who was a physical Tulane team 2 years ago in the Cotton Bowl. I believe it was the Cotton Bowl, and get beat. So Washington had their number. So these teams that play a physical brand of football tend to own them. I hate to tell you, you're coming to the Big Ten, and what is the Big Ten known to do? They're known to play a big
air it out.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Iowa airs it out.
Iowa airs it out, baby. They
by punting the ball.
Lungs. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So you're joining a conference in which their MO is big, physical, run the football, like old school football. I don't know about USC. Like you better hope it's an oil to water situation. Sorry, my Sumter just showed, where the oil just rises to the top and you're able to separate yourself and you don't sink. So that's my take on USC.
No, I'm kind of similar with that, Will. You mentioned 8 wins as kind of your threshold. I'm pretty similar. I'm right in that same expectation of 8 wins. I think anything less than 7, and it's like dangerously hot. I mean, he could for sure be gone. We had to take a deep look at last year, and on the recruiting trail, they were number 17. That's per 247 Sports. Transfer classes, they were number 19. So it's not like they had anything big name coming out of the portal either. And there's just a lot of weaknesses on defense. Obviously, we've talked about that.
Right.
They kind of shored up the secondary. They brought in a couple of defensive backs from Oregon State and UCLA. They were kind of poaching those, and Oregon State, obviously, because a lot of their defense left once they knew they weren't going to a big conference. But defensive line, they've kind of filled it with transfers that have experience in the SEC. They've got Anthony Lucas, who had experience at Texas A&M. They had Barry Alexander, who went to Georgia. Nate Clifton and Jamil Muhammad both had experience at Vanderbilt. So they're trying to fill the front line with big bodies. Does that necessarily mean that you're going to play SEC-style defensive line? No, absolutely not. But they're hoping so. Also, looking at last year, they gave up 34.5 points per game to their opponents. Awful. Rushing yards per attempt was just under 5, and passing yards per attempt was just under 8. So obviously they had to attack the secondary most, but I can see why they tried to pull at least one more defensive lineman out of the portal. Here's the most surprising stat, though. They were the 3rd worst in the Pac-12. I'll repeat that for the viewers at home. In the Pac-12 in total yards per game on defense. Overall, they were 108th. So you can see why that seat is warm. And obviously it starts and kind of ends with the defensive play. But coming into that schedule, there's just too many games that I have question marks on.
Well, they also finished the season last year losing 5 of 6, losing to Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, UCLA. And their only win there was a 1-point win over Cal. And they allowed 49 points to Cal. They won 50-49. So ending that way as well.
ACC.
Yeah, Cal of the ACC.
They were losing most of that game to Cal too.
Like, you end on a very rough note where you leave a sour taste in your mouth. Now, they did go out and, Miller Moss did play well in the bowl game, but that way to end a regular season after you were a preseason top 10 and you were top 10 through the first half of the year, winning games, and then all of a sudden you just collapsed, absolutely collapsed.
And I think the most damning thing you said, Tyler, and why he should be on the hot seat is the very first thing you brought up, and that's the recruiting trail. Lincoln Riley was brought to USC to recruit. He left Oklahoma for more access to recruits, a bigger school, a better chance at championships. You cannot be finishing 17th in the high school recruiting rankings unless you're going to be in the top 5 in transfer rankings, and he's not even doing that. So
yeah, maybe you think back to his days at Oklahoma, and because of that pipeline, he had some serious brute-sized talent, and he could fill it in with a guy like CeeDee Lamb or get a transfer like Jalen Hurts and kind of have success. So at USC, he brought in Caleb Williams, and then he recruited a guy like Zachariah Branch. That's not going to do it. You need more depth, and you need size and physicality. It's
right.
Not going to cut it.
Their schedule is also brutal. They start the season with LSU in Las Vegas, get Utah State, bye week, at Michigan, home versus Wisconsin, at Minnesota, home versus Penn State, at Maryland, home versus Rutgers, at Washington, bye week, home versus Nebraska, at UCLA, home versus Notre Dame. They could realistically face, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They could realistically face 7 ranked teams this year, when I think LSU will almost be ranked to start, will guarantee be ranked to start the season. Michigan will still be ranked. Wisconsin could be ranked. Penn State will likely be ranked. Don't sleep on Maryland because their schedule is easy. Don't sleep on Nebraska. Washington could find a way, and Notre Dame's almost certain to be ranked at the end of the year as well. There's a lot of games that are going to be difficult. They do get the benefit of basically going every other week, so they're not traveling every week. But a 4-game stretch where you go Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State, those are going to be 4 incredibly physical games.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see how that happens. I want to touch on, we said we're going to do Big Ten West, so we got a bunch more teams here I want to touch on. UCLA, I don't want to talk about too long. They did lose Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly does leave to go to Ohio State as the offensive coordinator. So we see some changes there. Dante Moore obviously leaves to go to Oregon. I think UCLA is going to be but one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the Big Ten. I don't think that's a hot take. I don't know what you guys think.
I don't think it's a hot take either. However, I do want to say this. I do think the DeShaun Foster hire is a really good hire. I think he's great for bringing back tradition. I mean, him being one of the best running backs in UCLA history. He's got that NFL pedigree. He played on probably the best team in the NFL. I forget what it was. Was it? Oh, yeah, the Panthers. Yeah, that's right.
He was also a Niner for a second.
Yeah, he was. And played pretty well there. But I think a guy who's from that area will be able to recruit really well there. And obviously, like I said, with his NFL pedigree and probably has NFL connections, and he can get some guys in the door to help coach and consult on some of these things going on. And now your consultants can be position coaches. So, yes, I agree UCLA is going to struggle heavily this year. But if they stick with DeShaun Foster, I think by year 3, he could be a really, really good football coach.
I agree. It's kind of funny preparing for our conversation tonight. I was looking back at the greats for these 4 West Coast schools coming to the Big Ten. And I'm sure the fans at home don't really know this, but do you know that one of the UCLA greats was running back Jackie Robinson? And I'm telling you the truth when I say Jackie Robinson, the Jackie Robinson, played at UCLA. So
he was like a 4-sport athlete, I thought.
Yeah.
I think he did track and field at UCLA as well.
Yep. And so I just had to throw that one out there for fun. But DeShaun Foster, I agree with you, Will, that he's going to be great for the program, having been an alumni, having gone through the tradition of UCLA. Sometimes going that route works out for you better than not. I think Oregon State the last couple of years, remember, they were really good. They were top 10 last year at one point. Who was their coach? Jonathan Smith. Jonathan Smith played quarterback at Oregon State. He knows what it's like to play there. He knows what it's like to, rally the fan base and tradition. I think going that route is perfect to get you back on track, to get the fans excited, because right now they're not excited.
Well, and when NIL is the game, how do you get boosters to get involved? Mostly boosters are going to be guys that are 40 and above. So those guys are the ones who've seen DeShaun Foster play. So they're going to like seeing him come back into the program could ignite some fandom that they had, and maybe they want to start putting in some more money and helping fundraise that program. I think it's a great move. And honestly, I think it worked out great for them because Chip Kelly was very outspoken about hating recruiting and did not want to do it. Even before the whole NIL thing, he was just like, I don't want to waste my time with this crap. Could not stand it. Him being a coordinator is perfect for him. But DeShaun Foster, like we said, he's gonna be boots on the ground, getting some guys in there. I wouldn't doubt seeing them good in the next 3 years. But they lost too much last year. They lost Dante Moore. Carson Steele left for the draft. And then what else did they have on that team? So it's gonna be a tough year for the Bruins.
I want to move on to the old Big Ten West. We got a couple of the old guard teams that we want to talk about here. Nebraska, Matt Rule. Dylan Raiola has arrived on campus, the savior of Cornhusker football. Can Dylan Raiola be undefeated when he plays Ohio State at the end of October?
Absolutely. I think he is. I think the one game that I have circled before that Ohio State game is actually I have two. Rutgers and Indiana. Now everybody's gonna laugh. Oh, Rutgers! Greg Schiano.
You skipped over Colorado.
No, I didn't. I did not skip over Colorado. I said what I meant to say. I think Rutgers is a team that nobody can take lightly this year. Gone are the days where Rutgers is your automatic 20-point victory where everybody's going to get to play. Greg Schiano's doing a really good job recruiting. His 2025 recruiting class, guys, is in the top 10 right now. Now, again, it's July, but he's competing with the big guys. I mean, he got a guy to stay, a linebacker to stay that he was competing against Clemson's and Virginia Tech, some bigger programs. I think Penn State was involved a little bit and gets him to stay at Rutgers. So Rutgers is not going to be a bad program for the years to come as long as Greg Schiano's there. And then Illinois, again, I'm forgetting the coach's name from JMU. Can't ever remember it.
Kurt
Indiana.
Yep, thank you. Well, he's at Indiana now, but from JMU. But I do love their quarterback that they got, Rourke. What's his first name? Curtis Rourke. Thank you.
From OU, Ohio University.
The Maple Missile. If he can stay healthy, I really, really like that quarterback. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if Indiana beats them, but that's a game that Nebraska should win. Nebraska has more talent than them. Nebraska has more talent than Rutgers. But can they do it with a freshman quarterback? I think they can. I think when Jake and I start our home and home, that Nebraska will be undefeated.
Yeah, I really do think that Dylan Raiola is going to make a splash. He came to Nebraska. He's going to start. There's no reason to think that he won't. I mean, he was, arguably the number one quarterback, or he was one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the class. Nebraska legacy, and the schedule: UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, and Illinois all at home. At Purdue, Rutgers at home, and then at Indiana with a bye week before that. Nothing there screams automatic loss. Colorado, we'll see if they have an offensive defensive line. If they don't, it could be end fast. Nebraska played pretty good defense overall last year. There was not many games where you looked at them and they just blew up. Colorado last year, they allowed 36 points, and that was the most they allowed. The second most they allowed last year was 24 to Wisconsin, and it was a 7-point loss. They were really good on defense, and they returned 8 defensive starters. They returned 9 offensive starters, and Dylan Raiola is going to be one of the new offensive starters this year. So they are an experienced team, and Matt Rule is a very good coach. Matt Rule is a really, really. He's won a conference championship in two different conferences. He's won a Big 10 or Big 12 title and an American Athletic Conference title with Temple. Temple of all teams, that is terrible in one of the worst programs in college football history. And Baylor, who was coming off of the Art Briles scandal, and he won a conference title there. Or maybe he made a conference championship. I don't remember the exact. But Matt Rule knows how to rebuild programs. He knows how to build them from the ground up. And you're seeing this happen at Nebraska. I think within 3 years, Nebraska makes the college football playoff. I don't think it'll be this year. I think the back end of that schedule is too difficult. I don't think 9-3 will get them into the playoff. I think they need to be at least 10-2. And a true freshman quarterback, I just don't see it happening at Nebraska this year. Yeah. I do think that they could get to 9 wins. I just think this back half of the schedule is a little too difficult with too many of the tough games on the road this year.
Yeah, and Matt Rule's magic number is 3. You said that, you kind of alluded to that earlier. At Baylor, his third year is when they started having great success. Shout out the Borat voice. And then Temple, year 3 was when he started having great success. So this is year 2 at Nebraska. But I think Nebraska has more resources than Temple and Baylor combined. Maybe I'm a little crazy. But somehow
Nebraska is a very passionate fan base where they will pour their heart, their soul, and their money into that team.
They've sold out that stadium every single home game, and they haven't been relevant in 30 years. I mean, well, they haven't been relevant since Ndamukong Suh's been there. So it's been a while. So we'll see. We'll see what the boys can do.
Yeah, I'm excited to see because I want to see Nebraska be good. We haven't seen them good in a long time. I would love to see Nebraska take that next step and get up into an 8-9 win. We haven't even seen them in a bowl game in a while.
Right.
They're due. Let's see them in the bowl game. Let's see what Raiola's got.
Yeah.
Iowa has a new offensive coordinator. There is Kirk Ferentz' son is no longer the offensive coordinator. Shockingly, he actually let his son go. I don't know how they actually let nepotism fly for that long, but we're here. Get a new offensive coordinator. Are they actually going to be able to play offense this year?
They're going to have a quarterback again until he gets hurt. So that's a good start. Cade McNamara coming back from injury. They're not going to be running like Deacon Hill out there, former linebacker playing quarterback.
Deacon Hill might be the worst college quarterback I've ever watched.
He's a linebacker. He's not a quarterback. Let's get that one.
260 pounds.
Yeah. You're still in Sextonville, though.
One thing that Iowa does have going for it on both sides of the ball is they got a lot of, I guess I'll say, veteran leadership. You listen to Big Ten media days this week, and you're going to hear every coach talk about how their leadership's the best in the conference. But
their culture's great.
You look up and down their depth chart, and I would have to say 80 or 90% of it is seniors or grad transfers. So they're going to have a lot of 4, maybe 5-year players on that squad. So you have to hope that translates to talent and see how that plays out.
Well, and think about this too, guys. Iowa, sorry, Jake. Iowa had the second worst offense in the country. They were right above Kent State. Can't write Kent State. Shout out to Cole. But they still won 10 games last year. So their defense is great, and they didn't lose that much off the defense. And they traditionally have a really good defense. I wouldn't be shocked for them to be a really good team, and you're going to find out more about why I think that later. But yeah, I think if the defense still does what it's been doing for the past however many years, they're going to win. They're going to win a bunch of games.
I think them losing Luke Lachey, their tight end last year, he got injured early in the year, only played 3 games, and still finished, it looks like, 8th in receiving for them last year. He had 10 receptions for 131 yards across 3 games, which might not sound like a lot, but for Iowa, 131 yards in 3 games is a lot. That is a lot for a receiver. And we know how Iowa does with tight ends. Just look at all the guys that are in the NFL. They've got plenty of dudes that are there. Sam Laporta, one of the most recent. You've got TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. You can go back to George Kittle. You've got plenty of guys that are Dallas Clark. You can look at that. Luke Lachey is going to be the next guy that ends up in the NFL as a tight end. Yes. And only having him for 3 games last year, that's one of their best weapons. So him coming back is going to be an immediate jump for them. And also Cade McNamara being able to play and not having Deacon Hill out there. We know Phil Parker runs a great defense. We know that to expect that. Doesn't matter who they throw out there. Well, they could throw us out there and we'll figure out a way to only allow 18 points a game.
That's right, baby. Hard nose.
I mean, they made Cooper DeJean a first-round pick or second-round pick or what it ended up being.
What's that?
I could play cornerback. I could play cornerback. I could play corner. I run like a solid 5'7".
Can you call fair catch and not call fair catch against a team in Minnesota? And
I will always call fair catch because I am not getting hit. That is my main thing. I am not getting hit. This age, if you hit me, I'm down for a week. So, and you look at Iowa's schedule this year: Illinois State, Iowa State, Troy at Minnesota. Iowa State always a tough game, rivalry game. At Minnesota, you can't take that one lightly. Then they get a bye at Ohio State. Then Washington, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, UCLA, bye at Maryland, Nebraska. First 4 games feel like a tune-up, and then it's just full go because you can't take Ohio State. At Ohio State's going to be tough. Washington at home, might be able to steal that one. Michigan State, we're not really sure what we're going to get out of them. Northwestern last year surprised a lot of people. David Braun was really good. Wisconsin, Luke Fickell seems like he's starting to move up a little bit. UCLA, they're probably going to beat them. Bye week, and then at Maryland, Maryland seems like they've been on the up, and then Nebraska, the last week of the year. I think Iowa could sneak in, 7 or 8 wins. I'm not sure we're going to get the Iowa that wins 9 or 10 games, though. I think that the schedule is just much more difficult than when they only played the Big Ten West teams and maybe got lucky and only had to play one of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Now when they've got Ohio State and Washington and Wisconsin, and Maryland and Nebraska, like it gets much more difficult. Maybe that's a hot take.
No, it's on par.
So I want to loop Wisconsin and Minnesota in together because they do play each other. Wisconsin, Minnesota, which one has a better season?
Wisconsin.
You both are very, very confident in that. Tell me your reason why.
You want to start, Tyler?
I like Luke Fickell coaching better. I think that.
Are you not a row the boat fan? Are you not getting out in a boat and a little dinghy and rowing?
Nope, wasn't a row the boat fan when he was in the MAC for sure. Definitely not a row the boat for him now. Tyler Van Dyke coming into Wisconsin, I think, kind of intrigues me. I feel like he might have been misused in the last year or two at Miami. Maybe he can do something. I like Chez Malusi at running back. I think he's a solid piece for them too. I just think that they're going to have an easier time scoring points than Minnesota, and that's what you need to win ball games.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat, no pun intended. But one of the things that I'm starting to worry about is there's a lot of negative publicity coming out about Minnesota lately. None of it's really caused much, but I think it was the UCLA job opened up. PJ Fleck put his name in the hat and got denied, and then he denied that he even did that. And then the whole the Fleck Bucks or whatever that came out, like there's a lot of negative things coming about how he runs his program. And regardless of if they're true or not, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I'm starting to think that maybe he's losing his luster over there in Minnesota. And that causes me more worry, especially when you have a guy like Luke Fickell that we're comparing him to. And Tyler Van Dyke is a lot better than Minnesota's quarterback and Max Brosmer, in my opinion. Now, Tyler Van Dyke, you're going to get some pretty good plays, and then you're going to see some bonehead stuff. And trust me, I saw it firsthand a lot while watching ACC football last year. But if anybody's going to get him right, it's going to be Luke Fickell. And then you have Chez Malusi. It's finally going to be his backfield. The Clemson.
Chez Malusi's been in college for like
45 years. He started off his career at Clemson and then somehow ends up in Wisconsin. Has been behind Braylon Allen for years. But it's his running back room now. And then Wisconsin they always have a good defense. And maybe that's bad for me to stereotype and not to put too much effort into looking into who they have on that defense, but they always have a good defense. So I'm not too worried about that. I would pick Wisconsin over Minnesota every day.
I will say the one curious point for me is Max Brosmer coming to Minnesota. If you don't know who Max Brosmer was, he was a quarterback for New Hampshire for the last few years. Last couple of years, he's thrown for over 3,000 yards each year. Threw for 3,400 last year, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Obviously, the level of competition is much different when you're in the Big Ten compared to FCS. But he was able to sling it. He did get a lot of FBS attention. So him going to Minnesota is an interesting move. Minnesota has had some subpar quarterback play over the last couple of years. Why am I blanking on their 8-year quarterback that was there forever? Tanner Morgan.
Tanner Morgan.
Tanner Morgan had a couple good years with Rashad Bateman, Tyler Johnson, and Chris Ottman-Bell. Then they bring in, a couple of different guys, Ethan Knappel or whatever his name was. Went through a couple different guys. Now, Max Browser is only a one-year guy. He's only going to be here 1 year. He's out of eligibility. He's using his COVID year to play here. I am incredibly interested to see how he fares against Big Ten defenses. And they opened the season with North Carolina. North Carolina has had up and down defenses. They really played pretty poor. They play Rhode Island, Nevada, and then September 21st, Iowa. He will struggle in that game. Then they go Michigan. There's 2 games in a row where if he can prove something, those are the 2 games to do it, because those are probably going to be 2 of the best defenses in the Big Ten for sure.
Yeah. And I do what I say. I like PJ Flake. I know y'all, sounds like y'all don't. I like him. I want to pull for the guy. I like what Minnesota does, but I also like Wisconsin. And I also like Luke Fickell. I like Luke Fickell a lot more.
So in our new Big Ten West, are there any other players that we should have mentioned as, key players for this conference that we haven't yet so far? Tyler, any thoughts?
You want me to go through the entire Oregon transfer portal? Is that what
yeah. Well, if you want to talk about one from Oregon, I think Evan Stewart would be him and Dylan Gabriel, but we've talked about Dylan Gabriel. But Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M, I believe, is a phenomenal running up wide receiver. And, you couldn't have made a better match with Dylan Gabriel coming over with him. So I'm really, really excited to see those two. Like you said, with Max Brosmer coming into Minnesota, again, he's one of those guys that not a lot of people are going to know about. Not many people watched New Hampshire Wildcats football last year. So, and he's going to learn what it's like to play in the Power Four. And then, I couldn't think of any other big ones.
My favorite one is Oregon's transfer kicker. It's Atticus Sappington. He transferred in from Oregon State.
That is not a real name. I'm sorry. That is not a real name.
Yeah,
don't worry. You're gonna love this one, Will, because his nickname is Automaticus. And
Automaticus, I love it.
So that one really stuck out. That ranks high for me above most of the others. I just can't let that one go.
That'd be a perfect Road to Glory player on college football. Yep. Atticus Sappington.
Teeing crumpets and kicking 50-yarders, baby.
Do you know Wisconsin has a punter named Atticus as well?
Wow.
Is this the League of Atticus? Is this the
Atticus Bertrams? Atticus Bertrams, who is their punter, who had 63 punts last year.
This is
what was going on in 2003 when
people were reading To Kill a Mockingbird. People were pretty excited about that book, I guess, back then.
And then Ethan, whatever his last name is, from Minnesota, is now the starting quarterback at Rutgers, in case you were curious.
Callie McManus.
Anyways,
hey, Jake, hold on. I want to see if you can pronounce Minnesota's 4th-string quarterback.
Hold on, let me go back to Minnesota. I'm almost guaranteeing that no matter if you're telling me to look this up, I cannot.
I'll send it in the chat. I'll send it in the chat.
I see it, and no, it starts with an S, and it's got a J, K, 2 Ks in it. It's got Shinchenjansky.
Well, he's obviously Polish, like a fine gentleman like myself.
Really, so. I thought it was Spanish.
Well, you missed the easy.
Shinchenjansky.
Oh, see, there you go. Well, y'all could have been a lot easier. I just said pronounce his name. You could have said Max. Just go with the first name.
That is such a dad joke. Such a dad joke. All right, out of the 8 teams in here, who do you think is a legitimate playoff contender? Obviously Oregon, so we can get that one out of the way. Are any of the other 7 legitimate playoff contenders?
Out of this side, I say no. Go ahead. Sorry, Tyler.
It's really hard to pick them. If I had to pick anybody, I might pick Nebraska. Maybe. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Nebraska and Wisconsin are in that tier where, they could come out and win 10 games and be like, oh, where did that come from? That's the type of team they are. We're not really sure. Other than that, I probably would say not. I think, your next preview, you're going to have almost all of them might have a chance. So
I think USC has an outside shot. This isn't a dark horse by any means. I just think USC has enough resources. There's enough talent on that team. Like I could see Zachariah Branch just winning 2 or 3 games for them alone because of how talented he is on the outside. Problem is they lose 3 games and they have a very tough schedule. It's almost going to feel inevitable that they're out with LSU, Michigan, Penn State, Washington, Nebraska, and Notre Dame.
That's brutal.
That like those are not easy games. And then you throw in a game like at Maryland. Like don't be surprised they slip up. Wisconsin, Rutgers, Washington. Like do not be surprised they slip up. But the thing is, if they can find a way to get going, if Miller Moss can like exceed expectations, honestly, and be a game changer, they could. I think there's enough talent on that offense to score points. I'm just still not sold on the defense being able to stop anybody. And also, I just think there's enough slip up games in there that 9-3, it's gonna be tough for them.
Well, and Tyler's a number guy. Let's give Miller Moss some credit. Tyler's a number guy, right? Right, Tyler. Three times is a trend. Lincoln Riley is a quarterback guru. I mean, I don't think there's much argument. I mean, so
no
Baker
argument.
Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Spencer Rattler. But do you want to give that credit to Lincoln Riley or not? Caleb Williams. So we got 5 guys, 4 if you want to take away Spencer Rattler, who have won a Heisman and been 2 of them were number 1. Nope, 3 of them were number 1 overall draft picks. So he knows what he's doing. So you get a guy like Miller Moss who has a lot of talent. Yeah, Jake, I don't think it's that far-fetched. I do think it's crazy that Jake wants him fired and also has him as a dark horse candidate to the playoffs. So I
didn't say I want him fired. I just think that the expectations are high, and if he flops and goes 6-6, USC is going to be ready to show him the door.
Yeah, well, my dark horse team would be Iowa, and this is right after y'all just took a nice little hot dump on them. But they do have a tough schedule, but I don't think it's College Football Network has it ranked as the 55th hardest schedule. So it's not terrible, but Iowa State's not going to be easy. Minnesota's not going to be easy. Ohio State obviously isn't going to be easy. Washington, Michigan State. I don't know if anybody knows what to think about Michigan State. Northwestern, you never know. Wisconsin, UCLA, Maryland, Nebraska. So we already went over their schedule earlier, but I think all those games are winnable. And I believe most of their hard games are at home. They have Nebraska at home. They have Wisconsin at home. They have Ohio State doesn't count. Ohio State's going to wipe the floor with them. And then they have Iowa State at home. So the other games besides Ohio State are at home. So I wouldn't be shocked if Iowa's in the top 4 of the Big Ten this year, if they can stay healthy, because of that defense. And it comes back to the defense again and the health of the offense and the new offensive coordinator. What if Alex Grinch is actually a great offensive coordinator and he went to Iowa, and then Ferentz, what's his first name? Brian Ferentz went to USC to coach defense, and he was actually a defensive guru, and they were just in the wrong spots. That would be a great rom-com.
The world's not ready for that. The world is not ready for that.
Tyler, let's get to work on it.
Hey, at USC, right in the land of Hollywood, too. I'm telling you, you got a match made.
The story writes itself.
Tyler, who's your dark horse? Who's your walk-on team?
My dark horse is probably Nebraska. The schedule speaks for itself. You get UTEP, you have Colorado, maybe a toss-up. We'll see. And then you get Northern Iowa. There's 3-0, most likely, possibly. We'll see. Then you get Illinois, Luke Altmaier. Well, you guys will talk about that one next week. But then Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana, those are all kind of, I mean, at that point, if Nebraska's winning and they're winning looking pretty good, I think that they could show up to Ohio State and be undefeated still. And at that point, the second half of their schedule gets a little harder. You got Nebraska and Iowa both not Nebraska. They got Wisconsin and on the road at Iowa. Kind of tougher, but, maybe 8 wins, maybe 9 wins. It's possible.
Yeah, I have Nebraska, and I really don't think they're outside of the top 4 teams, really. Anyone really has a chance to make the Big Ten championship just with how 18 teams, you lose 2 games, you're set up for tiebreakers. If you have to have 2 teams lose at least 2, and I think the playoff or the conference championship teams are going to only have 1 loss. And I don't see any of these other teams only losing 1 game in conference. But I'm with you there. I have Nebraska. I think Nebraska is an outside shot to make the playoff. That schedule just lines up so well. If that defense stays as strong as it was last year, I could see them really making a move. If Dylan Raiola is everything that people expect, he can absolutely be the missing piece for them lately. I don't think you can rely on a true freshman quarterback to come in and do everything. You need a lot of other pieces. You need that running game with Gabe Ervin and a couple other guys to really get it going. You need to establish that running game throughout the year. There isn't a wide receiver on this team that you look and go, wow, like this guy's a game changer. Like Jamal Banks has played in 43 games and has 1,400 yards. Like that doesn't scream game changer to me. So there's a lot of guys in here that I think could be helpful, but they're going to rely on the defense. MJ Sherman is a guy I think you'd watch out for, transfer from Georgia. I think he could be a really helpful piece in the center of that defense. You know, he was a former 5-star linebacker, is now at Nebraska. You know, he's going to play a physical game. I like Nebraska, but that end of the season, Ohio State, I think we have a feeling we know how it's going to go, but don't be shocked if something happens. But if they can win 2 of the 3 with USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa, they're sitting there at 10-2. You know, 10-2 might be good enough for you to make the playoff. Might be sitting there at 9 or 10. Never know. Dylan Raiola, first year. Matt Rule gets a lifetime extension. Nebraska's all set, ready to go. All right, so we got one question for this week. Elon Picks, like Elon Musk, says, how do you guys think Lincoln Riley will do without a future NFL quarterback? I'm going to let you go first, Tyler.
Well, I think Will said it pretty perfectly. He's got the track record, and I think Miller Moss, if he plays like he did in the bowl game, he's going to be pretty decent. Losing Malachi Nelson definitely doesn't hurt, but let's see what he does in this recruiting class. If he can't pull a prime time quarterback out of this recruiting class, I think that even seals his fate a little more. And you know, if you can't win with Miller Moss and you don't have a recruited quarterback and there's not one that you can really specifically poach out of the portal, I think you screwed the pooch. You pack up shop and you go on home to, you know, Texas, wherever he's from. Texas, Oklahoma, I can't remember. I was from the area.
Played at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
There he goes. Go home to Texas.
So number one, I think it's Mr. Elon. So I'll address you respectfully.
Mr. Musk.
Mr. Picks, excuse me, Mr. Picks. I don't know if it's hyphenated Musk Picks or if it's your maiden name, Musk. It's pretty presumptuous to think that he doesn't have a future NFL quarterback on his roster right now. So, like we said, Miller Moss, he was a 4-star guy, 94 rated, had a 94 rating on 24/7. I believe he was the 15th ranked quarterback in the country. He was a top 150 player. So he's not a terrible player. And they also have a backup that they got to transfer from UNLV. And his name is slipping me, Jaden Mayava, who almost rewrote the UNLV record book in terms of offense. And somehow UNLV kept their wide receiver but lost their really good quarterback. And I wouldn't be shocked if Miller Moss struggles if Jaden doesn't step up in there and become that next big-time Lincoln Riley transfer quarterback. So I don't think the offense is going to be the issue for USC. I don't think it ever has been. I don't think it ever will be. I think the issue has and always will be the trenches on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, but more specifically the defensive side of the ball. And Jake, you kind of alluded to it earlier when you said that they were, or maybe that was you, Tyler, when you said that they were giving up 8 yards a pass and just under 5 yards a run. The reason you give up 8 yards a pass is because you give up 5 yards a run. If you cannot stop the run, people can pass the ball over you because you cannot play. You can't key on either. So if you can't get guys in the trenches to compete and rotate and have depth, your defense is going to suck just like it did last year. So Mr. Elon Picks, Mr. or Mrs., I want to assume, I don't know. I think Lincoln Riley will do just fine offensively. I think Lincoln Riley will have USC at about 7 or 8 wins this year. So do with that what you may.
Yeah, William, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We don't know Miller Moss is not an NFL quarterback last year. He got one start and he threw 6 touchdowns in the bowl game against Louisville. I know you take bowl games with a grain of salt, but you don't just walk into throwing 6 touchdowns. You have to be pretty good. You have to have a good team around you. They beat a very good Louisville team. So this is not just some guy they brought off the bench, has never played. He's been in the system for a couple of years now. He's got talent around him. Deuce Robinson's a really good tight end. He was a true freshman last year. Zachariah Branch, which you already talked about. Like, he's going to have weapons. It's not like he has nobody to throw to. He's relying on this by himself. He's got a lot of talent there. I think Miller Moss can be a good quarterback. I don't think he is a first-round quarterback watching him so far, but let's see what the season holds. Maybe he changes. Maybe he does become that first-round quarterback, or at least a top 3-round draft guy, because he is draft eligible this year. So you never know. I am cautious about USC just because of that schedule. It's brutal. That first game against LSU, we're going to learn a ton about the Trojans. Learn an absolute ton. We're going to learn a lot about LSU then too, because there's 2 brand new quarterbacks.
Yeah,
2 brand new quarterbacks, but LSU has some pretty talented guys on that defense, such as Harold Perkins, and they're going to play physical. They play SEC ball. Like, they're going to be physical, even if they didn't have a great defense last year. Like, this also could be an absolute shootout, and there could be like 80 points in this game without question, which I'm kind of rooting for.
LSU, just like USC, had a terrible year defensively and wasted a Heisman quarterback here and cleaned house in their in their defensive coaching staff. So yeah, I'm curious to see. We're gonna learn a lot about both of them.
Personally, I hope neither of them fix their defense and we get like 160 points in the first week of the year, because that would be incredible.
That's right.
Are you saying take the over there, Jake? Is that what we're saying?
I'm already saying take the over. I don't even know what the over is, but take it.
Hammer it.
Hammer the over. Hammer the over. Well, that does it for today. That does it for this episode of the Walk on Red Shirts podcast. We'll be back next week, finishing up the Big Ten, focusing on the Eastern side. So that'll be Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana, Northwestern, Illinois, Purdue. And if I forgot anybody else, I'm sorry. Not that I don't care. You say I forgot Clemson?
Yeah, you forgot Clemson.
No, you meant Florida State.
Future Big Ten team.
You meant Florida State. Florida State, future Big Ten team.
That's right.
Make sure to go follow us on social media at Walk on Red Shirts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Make sure to go follow First and Goal at goal_first on all your social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we will be back again next week for another episode.